Hey, friends, welcome to the Connected Mom podcast. I am Becky Harling, your host, and I'm excited about today's conversation because, as you know, we're in the middle of a series on friendship, and I have one of my dearest friends here today in the studio with me. And, this person is kind of the friend that makes all of us look like, we're just like way far behind her. She's what my kids would call a double namer. They started that years ago. And when somebody was really important, they would call them a double namer. And so my dear friend Carol Kent is a double namer. You never hear her just called Carol unless you're out with her in a friend basis. But she is the infamous, famous Carol Kent. And I am so thrilled to have her here. She has really modeled for me a life of strength and dignity, as it says in Proverbs, through our friendship. And she models friendship even walking through really dark valleys. She has a new book out called Moments of Grace for Women, and I want you to get it. I have somebody very dear to me that I had given one of Carol's devotionals to a few years ago, and she still writes me today, and she says, Becky, that devotional is the best thing that ever happened to me. And so if you're looking to really, kind of up your quiet time or bring in something fresh, get Moments of Grace for Women, written by Carol Kent. But today we're going to talk about friendship a little bit and how that applies to us. So welcome, Carol.
Thank you so much, Becky. What fun to be on the air with you today.
I know I just love you to death, and we have had some crazy fun times together. You're actually in my new book, Friend Wise, you and Jean. So I know you received your copy. As you read through it, you'll have to look for yourselves. But
I know. I'm really curious about that.
Yeah, it's all good stuff, Carol. All good.
All right.
So I think I told the story. We're going to get to laughter in a minute, but we've been in restaurants together with our two husbands, and I think we've been the four loudest people in the restaurant. Would you agree?
I absolutely agree with that. And I think the ability to laugh with each other as friends is one of the most enriching and revitalizing things we can do. And I think there are certain people who pull that out of you. And you are one of those people because you find the humor even in a hard situation.
Well, thank you. You are too. And definitely our husbands are. I mean, when the four of us were together, I remember one time where we were laughing so loud, I thought, they're going to kick us out of here.
I would concern myself, but it was all good and very healthy for us.
Yes, it is. Laughter is healthy for us. I like to think it keeps us young, Carol. I don't know.
At this age, we need help, Becky.
That's right. All the help we can get. So let's talk about intentionality a little bit because, your life is very busy. You are the CEO of Speak Up, the conference, and you have Speak Up for Hope, which is your prison ministry. You're often out there on weekends speaking in churches. You're writing books. You're doing all the things. So what does intentionality and friendship look like in your life?
Well, Becky, one of the things I soon realized as ministry started to multiply is that one of the things I lacked were those lunch dates with friends, the opportunity to connect locally because I was on the road a whole lot. And I finally figured out that it was so crucial for me to maintain my Christian friendships locally that I started marking a lunch date or a breakfast date on my calendar as if it was as important as any kind of a speaking engagement or any kind of an interview that I might have. And if I did not save the time ahead of time, it wouldn't happen. And so I think we have to say no to some things in order to say yes to rich friendships. And that I hope will be the hallmark of the rest of my life because friendships are going to be there even in our old age. And we need to
praise God.
And the other thing is that how do we function without the support of other people? When I know there's somebody cheering for me, they're in my corner, they love me in spite of my flaws, in spite of the times when I might not have been for there for them when they really needed me. Wow, that's a rich friendship when they forgive instantly and they let you be the real deal in front of them.
Yeah, I love that. It's interesting because I do the same thing, Carol, because you and I are very similar, so we're the achievers and we've got the appointments on our calendar. And, I started a new system a couple of years ago where Sunday nights, I pray through my schedule for the week, right? And I look at the different areas, the podcast, the writing, the speaking, the coaching, things like that. But then I have a whole column for friends because every week I want to make sure that I am intentional to get together with a friend who just knows me as Becky. And we just have a good time together and can pray together because those friendships are so rich, like you said, and they give they bring a beauty to life that you wouldn't be able to have otherwise. And so we have to be intentional. And as you're listening, friends, you might be the mom of small kids, or you might be a mom of teenagers, and maybe you're a CEO. But I would encourage you to do what Carol and I have been doing. Write it in your calendar. Who am I going to have lunch with this week? Or who am I going to have coffee with? And take that tip, because it really does help you to be intentional. Where have you seen affirmation build your friendships, Carol? I mean, I happen to know that you're a master at this, so I'm coming at it from a slight edge here because I've seen you affirm tons of people. If you need a cheerleader in your life, get to know Carol Kent because she's everybody's biggest cheerleader.
Thank you, Becky. I think that affirmation of our friends is essential because most of us deal with a little low self-esteem. It's like we try to put on the smile, we like to look confident and courageous, but inside we're insecure. And it means so much to me when a true friend has heard me speak or read one of my books and they say, Carol, in this chapter, God just used what you said to touch me and encourage me. Thank you for being faithful to write what he put on your heart. And when you respect the person who is giving you affirmation, it's like God saying, you go, girl. I am for you. What you're doing is encouraging other people as they're reading your books or as they're hearing you speak. And so that affirmation becomes God's smile on the work of my life. And I think of that as the eureka of living out, using our gifts for his glory. But when a friend says, wow, you just knocked the ball out of the park, that was so helpful to me. And sometimes we can do that just with a one-sentence text. And we're all busy. Many women are working and juggling their careers with their children and their husbands and other responsibilities. And if you just send somebody a text saying one thing you appreciate about them and affirm them, that can be a bell ringer for them. It's like somebody noticed, somebody cared, and wow, that can both our spirits.
Yeah, I really agree with you because I think we can be a little bit hard on ourselves sometimes, right? And then you think, okay, I maybe didn't do the best job on this or that or whatever, and then you hear from a friend and you're like, oh wow, God used it anyway, and or when a friend writes and just appreciates your sense of humor or whatever. And I have seen you do this for so many people, because we've been at a lot of conferences together and I've seen you encourage those in the room. Oh, and sometimes you're in a conversation and there's maybe two or three of us there and you're shouting out affirmations to the different people in the circle. And I love that because I think that you are emulating the heart of God in that, because Jesus is our cheerleader. We often don't think of it as that, but he shines through you when you cheer others on. So Carol, from my heart to yours, thank you for doing that, because I have watched you for over 20 years do this with people.
You are so welcome. And I think part of it is to never be competitive with your friends. Don't try to outshine somebody else. Be there to tell them what they're doing right and then brag on it in front of other people. And that just blesses them to know that they did something right. Because especially when you're raising young children, and I think on the Mom podcast, you have a lot of women who are still in those years of raising those kids and feeling like, what am I doing? I remember a friend of mine saying, Carol, I have 2 master's degrees and I'm at home slapping peanut butter sandwiches together. And I said, what on earth am I doing with all of my training and education? And she said, I just needed to hear you say today that you're doing the most important thing you could ever do with your life right now. And I think sometimes we need to know that somebody noticed that I took the time to do something and give them a shout out. And I think it's important for us in front of other people to say out loud what our friends are doing well, because it lets them know that they shine. And we all need that. We need that affirmation.
We really do. And I'm glad you brought up not competing with your friends, because that is a big issue, not only in the industry that you and I are involved in, but definitely in motherhood, because one kid gets accepted to Yale, and another kid is struggling to get through high school, and another kid is the star on the soccer team, and another kid is struggling even to get up off the couch and not play video games. And so we need to not compare our lives to other people, because I think that really erodes friendship.
It
And
drags.
yeah, it really does. I remember this was years ago, um feeling kind of jealous. Steve and I were in ministry, and we had a small house with 4 kids, and seeing my friend have a bigger house and thinking, well, Lord, that would be nice. And then a few years after that, we had the opportunity to build a home, and we finally had enough space. And I remember that very same friend, telling me she was jealous. And I remember thinking to myself, huh, because you've had this big home
Yeah,
all these
yeah.
years,
Um,
but it makes you kind of withdraw a little bit when you see somebody
yeah,
competing with you, right?
for sure. And Becky, one of the other things with friendships, I think when we have developed a friendship and we can speak truth in love to each other, that is the mark of a growing friendship. When we can say out loud some of the hard things.
Yeah,
And
give
when
us an
we have,
example, Carol.
well, I have had somebody come to me and say, Carol, uh, you talk about the balanced life. And yet I look at your schedule and I see that you are going and going and going and going. And she said, I think you need to slow down so you can breathe. And Becky, you know that one of my sisters is now dealing with pancreatic cancer that is that very advanced.
Yes.
So this is a very hard time for me. And I remembered that advice. And I took for my word of the year time, because I intentionally, with the advice of this friend, decided to slow down my schedule so I can pay attention to the needs of my precious sister right now, and even organize some of the relatives coming in to see her. And this is a different pace for me, because I'm usually go, 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 schedule, schedule, schedule. But for the next couple of months, I've said no in order to say yes to something higher. And that is to value my precious sister in a way that nurtures her in her greatest time of need and blesses me, because my love for her is so great. And that advice came from a friend. And I am so grateful. It was hard to hear, because I'd like to think that I can do it all. I can maintain the heavy schedule and I can take the time to be there for her, but I cannot do it all. And that has been a very, very important thing for me this year. I'm still learning and I don't make mistakes, but I'm trying.
I love that, Carol. I have friends in my life too who can speak truth in my life. And because of the depth of our friendship and the years of friendship, and that they love you, they say things truthfully, but also in love, and in gentleness. And that is really a blessing in our lives. I've had friends tell me, okay, you're worrying too much about, this contract or that contract, and God has it, and you can trust God with this. And I received that from them because they've walked with me through a lot of years. And, one of the things that I always tell women is don't give unsolicited advice. However, if there's the depth of friendship, you should be able to receive advice from your close friends. Let's talk about boundaries a little, and how you've done a really good job, I feel like, of modeling for me boundaries, because I think sometimes my heart, I want to I want to dive in and be all things to all people, and we just can't be, can we? We have to embrace our limits. So talk to us about that a little bit.
Well, Becky, I wound up in a situation at one point where I had several very close friendships. And as ministry began to multiply and I was away more and more of the time, I wound up feeling like I was hurting people who I was not in touch with, and they were wanting to be closer. And so we got together and talked about the fact that one of the boundaries I had to set was that I could not be physically with them as often as I had been in the past. But we talked about the importance of nurturing each other in other ways. It might be just sending that text message, it might be a very short phone call, or it might be just volunteering to take care of somebody's child so that they can have a free night. And there were some hard feelings at first because people like time, and time is important in friendships. But then we talked about the fact that uh, the best friendships are when it's just the same, whether you've been with somebody yesterday or 2 weeks ago or 2 months ago, and that you can pick up right where you left off because your love for that person has not diminished and that you care deeply for them. And I think one of the ways we can bridge that gap is through praying for each other every single day. And Becky, I know you shine in that area. You are so good at praying for your friends. And I never feel like you have forgotten me if you haven't been in touch with me during a certain week. I just know that when you're back home and you have a couple of days, I'm probably going to get a text message or a quick email from you. And that blesses me. And then every time I see you, it's like best friends forever. We like no time has passed. And I think we need to forgive each other for busy schedules and just realize that we are all there when we can be together, but it can't be every single day.
Yeah, I remember there was a season in my life where I had somebody confront me because she felt like I just didn't have time for her. I wanted to be her friend, but at the time I was raising 4 kids, which is a lot of kids. And, doing ministry and trying to keep up with my husband, Steve, and, all the things. And since that time, sometimes when I'm at the beginning stages of a friend, I actually have the conversation then. And I say, I want you to know this friendship is going to be really important to me. But sometimes it's going to be a hard friendship because of what I do. And I do have to do that, and I have just found that my best friends offer a lot of grace and understanding. They get my life, they don't have these extraordinary expectations. They know, okay, Becky's on the road right now, but when she gets back, we'll do lunch or whatever, or she'll send a text and she's praying for us and we love her, and it's just okay. But and I think we have to be okay allowing ourselves to be there, because I, like you, there was a time where I felt guilty, and I remember laying in bed at night praying one night, Lord, there are so many people and I love them all, but I can't be there for all of them because I'm only one person. So I have to accept the limits that God places on me. And really, that's what boundaries are, right? They're limits.
I just love it. And one thing that is great is when you get in the rhythm of that with a friend who understands, it cements the relationship. In many ways, it's a stronger friendship than it has ever been in the past because it's a mature friendship. It isn't making harsh demands that feel hard to do. It's allowing that person to live the life God has called them to live and to understand. So it's really a give and take that strengthens a friendship. And I love that word you use, grace in our relationships. I mean, we grace all over you because it is just so wonderful to know that people can be there for you and you receive that and you love the time together. But then there's going to be a time period when you don't have that person in your life personally, physically, every single day. Use that time to pray for your friends.
Yeah, that's great. I love that reminder. And one of the things that I have seen modeled so well in you, Carol, is, Proverbs 31 talks about a woman who lives her life with strength and dignity, and you model that very, very well. And you have walked through some very hard seasons, your son going to jail for life. Now you're walking through a season where your sister, is at the end, but the beginning of heaven and going to be transitioning soon. And, what would you say to our moms out there? How do they develop strength and dignity for the long haul?
I think one of the most important things we can do is spend time in God's Word every single day. And you might think, I can't read a whole chapter. Pick a verse and just say, Lord, what are you speaking into my life through this verse today? And ask Him to give you guidance for the day and wisdom for when you connect with other people. And I think there is such a beauty in just engaging with a friend, even momentarily, if you see them in the church lobby, putting a hand on the arm, there's something special about meaningful touch. And just give them a little arm squeeze or just grab that hand and say, God has put you on my mind this week. I'm praying for you. Just know how much you're loved. And those short moments make people know they matter because they do. I can't imagine our lives without friends. It's just the most precious thing that God has given to us to be able to uplift and encourage each other and cheerlead for one another. And so it just goes on and on. The more we give, the more blessing that comes back to us in a relationship. And so, Becky, you really get the Friendship of the Year award because you do that so well. And I know our listeners are hearing about this incredible new book, Friend Wise, that just released when I got home from a trip. This was in my mailbox. It is so filled with wisdom and biblical principles on being a friend who sticks close. And we think of the friend who sticks closer than a brother or a sister. Wow, it means so much to know how to do it right. Thank you for sharing your wisdom with us and giving us so many tips that will help us to be better friends.
Well, and there's a great example of how Carol is the best cheerleader ever. I didn't know she was going to say that. But that's Carol. So take a lesson from Carol and do that for your friends. And by all means, get her book, Moments of Grace for Women, because you need grace in the motherhood journey, and you need grace for your friendships. You need grace in your marriage. You need grace as you do this journey. And so your friends can come alongside of you. But as Carol said, there is a friend that sticks closer than a brother, and his name is Jesus. And I love in John 15 how Jesus says, I have called you friends. And we have that friend in Jesus, like the old hymn says, and he will be with us right through the rest of our life. Hey, Carol, we are out of time, but man, I could talk to you forever. And you know that because we've done that sometimes in our
I love
friendship.
that.
But friends,
Becky, thank you for being in my life. You are a precious friend to me, and I'm so grateful that God allowed our paths to cross.
well, you are a precious friend to me. I remember the first time that we really became friends. It was at a conference, and I walked in the room. It was right after my first book. I was feeling very insecure. Like, these people in the room are They know what they're doing, and I haven't a clue. And you said, come sit by me. And we just hit it off then. And I am so thankful for your friendship in my life, Carol. You are such a wise friend, and you walk out life and faith with such strength and dignity. So, friends, thanks for joining us today. And I hope you're going to join us next week for another conversation about friendship. I just feel like this is a really important topic at this current moment in our history, because we need our friends. Life is going to be hard, but Jesus will be with us through it all, and we need a life-giving community around us. So thanks for joining us, and we hope you join us again next week. And Carol, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, it's been an honor and such a joy, Becky. God bless
Thank
you.
you. God bless you.